Welcome to a Creative Approach podcast. I'm your host, Karen Poirier-Brody. Now, I'd hoped to get this podcast up before the holiday break, but it was not meant to be. Unfortunately, I've had a bout of shingles that set me back a bit. I'm taking a roll with it approach. That includes facing an editing setback. I received a message from my last editor on January 4th that the podcast would be ready for the following Wednesday. Then nothing. I have gone back to my very professional former editor and anticipate podcast releases every 3 weeks with a summer and a winter break. Meanwhile, I'm getting healthy, and I'm looking forward to 2019. I've got great guests booked for interviews, which makes this podcast, despite all the work, a labor of love. Now, I'm going to take this moment to advise those over 50 to speak to their clinician about getting the shingles vaccine. Now, I did get the older Zostavax one about 6 years ago and credit it with helping me with my outbreak. I was miserable, but I'm sure it could have been much worse from patients I have seen and cases I've heard about. When completely healthy, I plan to get the new vaccine, Shingrix. Well, the holiday season is past for both my family and my friends, and I found it a joy to prepare the house with decorations. I hope it was for you too. With a large extended family and many friends, we stretched our holiday with the Canadian family tradition of a Boxing Day celebration. I know those in many Commonwealth countries celebrate the same. It's our ways of avoiding the in-law-outlaw conflicts in our family, and we celebrate a bit of what I remember about visiting relatives during the holiday season. I leave the decorations up for the entire 12 days of Christmas, and then some, because I have Ukrainian-Canadian roots, and of course, that Christmas is celebrated on the other calendar. Now things are put away, and we look forward to enjoying the crisp winter days in Sacramento. But driving to the snow. Enough of catching you up and my story. It's time to talk about my guest today. I learned about today's very creative and naturally talented artist, Mou Saha, through the world of scrapbooking. Though I'd best describe Mou as a mixed media artist and storyteller. I had the delight of meeting her at the Association for Industry's Creativation meeting in Phoenix just this past week. Mou is an intelligent and courageous woman whose passionate and straightforward manner makes artistic expression easy and pleasurable. Despite several life complications and setbacks, she's made the most of her situation, taken chances, and produced meaningful work. This self-effacing teacher has a daring spirit of exploration and inspires many to try their hand at experimentation with art media and color. It's a delight to bring you this visit with Mou Saha today to discuss her creative approach. Welcome to a Creative Approach podcast. I am very delighted today to have Mou Saha with me as my guest, and Mou is basically a multimedia storyteller is how I would describe her. Hi, Mou.
Hi.
Welcome to the show. And I usually have my guests give me a little bit more about what it is exactly they do for the listener. So if you could tell me, I don't know if I summed it up as a multimedia storyteller, but how would you describe what it is that you do?
Well, that's the first time anybody described me as a storyteller, and I kind of like that.
Good. But I think it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, that kind of thought sent me into a thought process, and I'm thinking, yeah, whenever we are making something, we are telling stories. So in that way, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so it's art, but you put a lot of meaning behind what you're doing.
Yeah, it's really not always conscious choice. It's just how it evolves. Most of the time, I feel that whatever I am making, I have no control over it, really. It just takes me where it needs to take me. Very rarely do I consciously put in meaning. But when it's all done, sometimes I see it myself. Sometimes the viewer would see and say, oh, so this means this. And I'm thinking, yeah, it does. But I wasn't thinking to put it there because of that. It just showed up. And now I'm tracking back. And yes, it makes sense.
And you're a teacher as well as an artist.
Yes.
Yeah, and you have done classes. Now, you do online classes? Do you do in-person classes?
It has evolved over time. In the beginning, it used to be with the magazines. There were those events that used to be more in person, and I used to travel. Like, I still travel, but it's a lot less. And I think everything is now shifting more online, so the teaching has also shifted online. And that has kind of increased the audience, people in different continents. We are communicating with them. And yeah, it has definitely moved more online. But I still do a few in-person events.
And then I think I found you, you've taught classes. I think I saw an article in Cloth, Paper, Scissors. And then was that big picture classes that you were teaching in a while back?
Yeah.
I was going to just say, what other sort of areas have you taught, or what other publications or?
It originally started, began to get published starting in 2005. And after that, Creating Keepsakes, that magazine is no longer there, but Creating Keepsakes magazine became a very large part of my life, and I was published a lot with them. I think that was my favorite magazine. And sister publication was Simple Scrapbooks, who then, the founders then went on to create big picture classes. And I was asked, you are doing this magazine work, would you also like to teach? And I was new at teaching. And I was teaching myself, and what I learned, I taught others. So it began to grow from there. And then with time, scrapbooking began to fade a little in importance for myself. When kids start to grow up, they don't want to pose. They don't think it's cool to record all those little details of their lives that I was doing. And I didn't want to force them, pose for me or do this with me. And I was also growing into something else where I was telling my stories in a different way with colors, textures, and I was moving toward mixed media. This was the time when Faber-Castell, they launched a brand for the crafting community, which was called Design Memory Craft. And they reached out to me. They asked me to make some projects for their booth for their launch. And after I did that, I sent the stuff in, emailed them the files, and a few hours later, I got another email saying, hey, would you like to be part of our design team? Because we are trying to put a design team together so that once the brand is launched, we have people who can show others how to do. We are going to have a blog, and we need blog projects, and we want a few design team members. Would you be interested? And I'm like, oh, yeah, of course I would, because it would be a dream. I had been using Faber-Castell since I was 8 years old and I grew up in India. I was born in India, and that's where I grew up. And somebody gave me a set of Faber-Castell pencils when I was 8 as part of my birthday gift. That I still have that tin. When I moved to the States, I could only bring very few things with me. And that was one of the things that I brought here with me.
That's wonderful. A real treasure from your childhood. Had you been drawing a lot before that time?
I have always been drawing, I drew everything in sight. I was no good at drawing, but it didn't stop me from doing because I wanted to do it so much. And in India back then, we did not have the little sketchbooks that are so easily available here now. So my mom would buy the paper, fold them up, and stitch them up for me. And I would go through these little sketchbooks so quickly, I'm drawing front and back, and I'm going through so much. And people would carry cameras when they traveled. I carried sketchbooks, and I would draw anything. It did not matter whether it looked like the thing. It did not matter. It made sense to me. And that was what I wanted to do. Hours would pass by, and people wouldn't even know that I'm there.
Your parents probably liked that in some circumstances.
I was an only child, so it's not like there was a lot else happening in the house. But they always treated me almost like a small adult, and I was part of decision making and everything. And also my family, my grandma, my father's mother, they were not really commercially artistic, but they lived very artfully. It was like in everything, whether she was chopping vegetables or just putting up small decorations in the house, whatever they were doing. And my mom is the same way. And I got that. They did like small things with such love, and just watching them made me just want to be like them, do what they do. And they didn't necessarily draw, but I liked drawing. That was what I was most inclined to do. And I just drew all the time. Like, who thought what did not matter? I wasn't doing it for accuracy. I wasn't doing it for anything. But I was doing it to express myself. And my mom would sometimes take me to these little sit and draw art contests for children. And they would give us a theme, and they would say, give us 2 hours, draw. They would give us pieces of paper, and we would draw, color, whatever. Everybody around me did a better job than I was doing. If I compared, that's what I would feel. Like, oh my goodness, look at the colors. Look at how nice theirs look, and mine didn't. But it always was something was coming out of my heart, and that was something visible to the people who were judging these contests, because their beautiful work would make second place, and I would come out in the first place, and which came as a surprise to me and as a shock to them. Like, I wouldn't expect to be there, but they saw something that I didn't see in myself. And after that, when I was in 6th grade, I believe, that's when I got a national scholarship for drawing. My school recommended me to go do the interview and to just bring a portfolio. At that time, I didn't know what a portfolio was. And nobody in my family is a commercial artist, and they don't know anything about these things. So I just showed up with a bunch of my sketchbooks, and okay, here I am.
Uh-huh. Well, that's cool. I mean, in the 6th grade, that's marvelous.
Yeah, I did not understand the significance of it till I went there and I saw all the people who were nervous to be there, because they probably felt like if they didn't get in, that is disappointing for them. And for me, to just be considered to be there is an upgrade.
And so was that for a high school study, a middle school, high school study?
No, it was just a national scholarship. It was organized by the Center for Cultural Resources. And what they do in India is they would look for children in every state. So those children who are doing especially folk art, whether it's painting or dancing or singing, whatever they are doing to keep those folk art alive. And they also saw, what are the city kids doing? Who has the potential to someday keep doing this and not just give it up beyond a certain years, Because most kids draw when they're little, but once they grow up, they either don't have the time or they lose interest, they move on to other things. But they were trying to keep those alive, that yes, somebody who has that passion for art.
So the result was a prize, or you had some special classes, or what did they do?
The scholarship was more of an honor rather than anything else. And they said that you can keep the scholarship. They would test every year to see if this person is making any progress or if they're even doing any work at all. And then it would be renewed every year. And that kind of kept me in place. Yes, this is important now. I was starting to begin to understand that this is serious. There was a prize money, but the prize money wasn't necessarily something that was life-altering. But that, who cared? At that time, I was like, oh, wow, I got a scholarship in painting, in drawing. I can't believe it. And from that, they would ask us to submit our work. And a lot of those work, they were sent to various countries as part of, this is the youth of India and their art. And some of those, I have worked in museums in Germany, in Poland, and some other countries. I don't remember everything off the top of my head, but that was cool. Thinking of my little drawing in a global perspective was very cool.
And very encouraging.
Yeah, it still didn't seem to me my parents were always very, very encouraging. But they still wanted me to have a safe, a proper job, So that was there. And at that time, when I was in 8th grade, I was already very interested in doing counseling and psychology. So I found out what I needed to do to be able to do that. And I was fully prepared to become a clinical psychologist. And then when I was doing my master's thesis, that's when we were trying to figure out a topic, like what would be an enjoyable topic for me, because I needed to enjoy it for it to be meaningful to me. And people were doing like, okay, I'm going to do a paper on depression because it's very easy to find literature on that kind of stuff. They were thinking in terms of that. And I was thinking like, okay, I got this opportunity. When can I devote so much time to doing something I like? So I have to find a topic that I really liked. So my professor and we talked, and he said around this time where that scholarship that comes back in again, when they were organizing an event where they were inviting kids from all over the country to come to one place and to present their art. So everybody else could be introduced to their art, their culture. Because in India, there's so much diversity. The language, the clothing, the food, the dialects, the dance, the music, everything is different from one state to the next.
There are so many people, I cannot imagine.
It is so beautiful. And I went there, and like my father was not very happy with the idea that I was going to travel by myself. And they said, well, we are going to fund one student or one of the recipients and one guardian to come with. So, and it was so late. My father was like, you are never going to get plane tickets you wouldn't get. And they were not going to fund plane tickets. They were only going to fund train tickets, and train tickets were already booked. So, and my father, he's very traditional Bengali Hindu man who cannot imagine his daughter traveling across the country to go somewhere and do something like that. It's too wild for his. At that time, he was like, no. You are not going anywhere. And I was like, this is an opportunity I don't want to miss. And he was totally coming from a different point of view, which I can understand as a parent today. But at that time, I was like, I have to figure out a way to make this happen. How do I do it? So what I did was I left home for college and I went to the headquarters for the railway. That was at the headquarters in my city, Calcutta. So I went there and I waited to see the manager, whoever was the most important person there. And I showed him the letter of invite, and I told him that I can't find a ticket. I even looked for plane tickets and I couldn't find that either. So this is my only way of getting there. Is there something you can do for me? And he gave me 2 first-class tickets. And he told me, and after that I was just leaving. I was so excited. And he said, well, you know what? We are very proud of you.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that kind of, they were not afraid. They didn't look at me as somebody who needed to be protected. They saw me as somebody who they were proud of, somebody who was doing something they could be proud of. Like, this is a girl who's coming from West Bengal, Calcutta, and she's going to represent us somewhere.
That's great.
So that's there. And my father was like, oh my God, how could you just go to the railway office? You shouldn't have done that. I was like, done. And that was kind of an inkling I had for the first time that I could move beyond what my parents thought were safe, what my parents thought I could and couldn't do. Like, there is a world of possibility beyond.
Of course. Well, what I was trying to do is relate now that particular event, and you were talking about your master's, and it kind of switched into what you were doing as far as getting to travel and do this. So what happened there?
So what connects that is that we discussed about the topic of the thesis, and my professor said, well, you are going there. How about you collect data to see how people who are traditionally artists, like, they inherited the business of the sculpture from their family, because we have a lot of religious idols and whatnot, temples. We have a lot of sculpture, magnificent sculpture. And they do that like as generation after generation in their family. So my professor said, Sheikh, we did a questionnaire, which was like, what is the effect of negative emotions? Like, does being a sculptor, because you are exerting more force when you are carving something away, does it help to dissolve more negative emotions than when you are softly painting something? So it was a very complicated thing, and we only scratched the surface at that point of time. But that was amazing. I spoke to the traditional artists, and many of them did not even speak my language. So it was not easy. I had to find somebody who spoke my language and theirs because they don't all speak English either. And finding that out, it was an eye-opener for me. And it seemed like there's a world out there that I have not seen.
What an amazing opportunity, yeah.
That was an amazing, and I felt so lucky to be able to make the most of that opportunity. The timing of it was perfect. And 10 months after that, I got married. And when I moved to Tampa, Florida with my husband. And it was like everything was coming full circle for me because the questionnaire that we used for collecting the data when I went to Bangalore for the event, the person who made that questionnaire, Dr. Charles Spielberger, I met him. He was a professor at the University of South Florida, Tampa. And I went and I saw him and I told him, I know you from the tests that I used. And he asked me if I wanted to work for him. So I helped him out in his office a little bit. And then I told him what I wanted to do, I told him that I did not feel I was good enough to become an independent artist because I probably would starve. That was the mindset we grew up with. That's not a proper job. That's not how you live life. That's a hobby. And then I told him that, but in order for me to keep that alive, I need to be doing something where I can use my education in clinical psychology and what I love to do, art. How do I combine that? That's my ultimate goal. So we worked on that. I took another course. It was like family and marriage counseling. What it did for me, apart from the logistics of going to school in a foreign country when there are immigration restrictions, what you can and cannot do with your visa status and how much money it would cost if you're paying out of pocket. And my husband was also very young at the time. Now he can afford to send my kids to college. But back then he was young. I was young. I couldn't, if I applied for a scholarship, I had to do it as a student. And I couldn't do it because I was on a spouse visa. And if I changed that status from spouse to student, then his green card and my green card, they would totally stop. So all of those complexities were there. And that did not make me super happy. Like I almost lost everything about me in the process of coming here. And my marriage was arranged by our families. So it felt like, what can I do? It's like feeling like I am so lost. I don't know what to do. And it's like time is running out. It's so precious. And it's running out and I'm doing nothing. It's not that I wasn't doing anything, but it felt like I wasn't doing anything that would make me feel satisfied at the end of the day. But when I went to take that course, I told my husband, you know what, we can afford this much. It was not very expensive. It was just a little course. So I went and did that. But when I went and did that, I came to the realization that I was no longer in India. What I learned there, even though it's all theories and everything are the same all the world over, but still the cultures are so different. The priorities are different. How can I, all of a sudden, when I don't know this culture so well, help somebody get adjusted better?
In psychology.
So it did not seem like a loss of something at that point. It was not like I was ready and I didn't have an opportunity. I felt that no, I don't know this culture well enough and I cannot work hard to set up a practice based on just wanting to cater to Indian clients. And how many Indian people go and seek this help? Not very many to my knowledge. So that did not seem like a viable option at that time to me. And right after that, I had my first child. So when all of that began to happen, and it was just, realizing the restrictions and coming to terms with it. That took about 2-3 years, and then I had a baby. About when she was about 6 months or so old, that's when I discovered scrapbooking. I went to my local library and they had a Creating Keepsakes magazine on their stand. And I took that magazine, I looked through it, and I was fascinated. Like, wow, this is a thing. People actually do this thing, and this is so cool. And so I told my husband, let's go do some shopping. And he has always been extremely generous with funding my hobbies. But he cannot give too much time because he has a very demanding job. He's one of the top directors for Verizon. So that keeps him seriously busy. So I needed some outlet other than raising my daughter, where I wasn't lost to myself. And around that time, I started scrapbooking. Like I finished my daughter's baby book was the first scrapbook I did ever. And then it was so much fun. And it was like, wow. And even then, when you could buy, I bought so much stickers. So I still have so much of those products left over. But still, I began to see that I enjoyed making my own embellishments, like weird little things that only I would make because nobody, it's so not mainstream that somebody would make and sell. But it would fit my page so much better if I did it that way. So I was venturing beyond and I did not know anything about anything. So it didn't matter if anybody else saw it or not. I did the thing, I put it in a nice box and I kept it that when my daughter turns 18, that's when I'm going to give it to her. She knows about it, but that was my goal. Like that's the goal. And around this time, another huge life event. Like a lot of big things happened to me very fast. I got married within a week of the marriage. Like I finished my master's and I left before my results came out.
Oh, so you came to America, right? Everything happened all at once.
So we finished the exams around September and I got married in November and I moved within a week of that. I moved here in December 1999 and 3 years into that, I had a baby. So a lot of things was happening real fast and all of this was very positive and very nice. And then came the turning point. They found a lump in my breast and they didn't expect for that to happen because I was very, very young at that time. And everybody was very, very concerned because it was not typical from any angle at all. And I just felt like I wasn't so much bothered about the consequence of that. My concern was if I don't make it, because it sounded like I might not, how is my daughter going to know me? My daughter was only 18 months or so around that time. So between that, they immediately scheduled surgery, like the doctor's calling me after hours Friday evening. And her voice is quivering, talking to me. And then, because I don't know, maybe whatever it was, she took it very personally and she just didn't want me to die. So we organized surgeries and everything within a week. And I had 1 week. And my first effort was to organize everything as much as I could so they would be able to continue while I was in surgery after I was back. And then it hit me, I can't take care of their lives completely. No matter what happens, I have to let it go and let it unfold. I am not in charge in this scenario. And what I did was whatever papers and stuff that I had, and I didn't even care to go shopping for anything this time. I just sat down and I did a few pages. I found a few pictures that I had brought with me when I came from India. Added a few pictures to a few pages that are like basically art paper that I cut down into smaller sizes. And I wrote a little bit about myself just so that my daughter would know me if I don't make it through that book. And so I went, I had my surgery. Things did look bad, but it was not so bad that life was turned upside down. And once I started letting go, things started to ease up. And whatever treatment was necessary, we did that. Still there's a lot of atypia. I have to go through biopsies. I have to go through mammograms every 6 months. We still do that. I just had another surgery like in end of September. But that has become an ongoing process. And I'm grateful for whatever treatments are available here, that I can still live a mostly normal life.
Wow, that's good because it's a hard thing. Yeah.
Once it finds you, it doesn't leave you very easily. It doesn't leave you alone either.
But you've sort of adapted your life to this reality.
Yeah, and it has really not brought life to a standstill, thankfully. I have had more children. We do a lot of things, and I know there are things I cannot do. But still, what I can do is also not very little. So that is I'm happy about that. And after that, when I came back from the hospital and I was recovering, I was browsing. That was the time of 2 peas in a bucket. There was this online forum where scrapbooks and some thread led to some other thread, and I found this magazine, Simple Scrapbooks. And I had not known of Simple Scrapbooks at that time. I had only seen that creating keepsakes, but I didn't know of Simple Scrapbooks. So they had a contest. It was like my coolest album ever. And I just felt, you know what? My book that I made for my daughter, that is the coolest album ever because it was so personally meaningful. I did it with a purpose. It was not about the embellishments because there was hardly any. It was just my pictures, and I had very few pictures. They were black and white pictures, and I had some writing.
And so it was the story.
Yeah. It was why people scrapbook. It was like nothing was cooler than that. I have made nicer pages since. I have grown as an artist doing that. But no, that was till this day, that is my coolest album.
For me, that's what I like about scrapbooking is telling my story with pictures. And so
yes.
I haven't really written things for my children, but, they're just out there. It's a way of creating, I think. But that's great because that's where yours came from. You made it for your daughter, but it was all about you, and it was what you wanted to tell the world, especially her.
I just started with a letter to her that someday, I don't know if you're going to read this together someday or you're going to do so alone, but this is me. Nobody can tell you about me better than this.
Right. And so you entered that in the contest.
I entered that in a contest. I don't know what I was thinking. It was very personal, but I did. And I think it was a month later, I got a call from Stacey Julian. At that time, I was still not very well. I had recovered fully, but she called me and she said that I had won the grand prize. And like, okay, this is happening. It was not even, like I won a prize or this is something. To me at the time was like somebody else other than my daughter, who was not old enough to understand anything at that time, found that it was cool enough. There was a sense of validation in that after a long time of, I can't continue to study here, I cannot continue to work here, I cannot do anything I want to do here because there are so many legal restrictions. Then there is the constraint on time because I have a child, my husband is busy, and all of those things. And that felt like I felt so validated. Like I didn't have to be a great artist for that. I was just somebody thought that was important, that story mattered. And from that point, it became something that story matters, that voice matters. And it took my life on a completely different route. That was the time like I felt like, okay, so I came back this time. What if I don't come back next time? I don't know when that day would be. It could be a year, it could be 10 years, who knows? But whatever time I have left, I'm going to do something I cannot not do anymore. And that is I will make some art. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be in a museum. But I will do because it brings me joy. And I think the giving up that expectation that you have to be something great if you're doing anything helped me, freed me up because I wasn't choked by the fear that what I am producing, how is it going to be judged? I was not afraid. Then I entered Hall of Fame, which was a scrapbooking contest with Creative Keepsakes magazine at the time, and then Scrapbooker of the Year. And there, I had no reason to enter these contests. Like, I was not even good enough to enter them. But I entered them and I won. I won because I took a chance. And that's how I continued to do whatever it is I did from that point on. Like, it's okay. It's no different from the sit and draw contest my mom used to take me to. It's okay. I'm in a different culture. It's okay. I don't do many of the things as well as other people can. But I can do something which other people also think that is better than theirs. And I do it because I love doing it.
Yeah, it comes from your heart.
Yes. This is something I cannot not do. I have to.
That's wonderful. And so from that, as you said, you evolved into teaching.
Yes, because, had I gone to a proper art school, learned art the proper way, I would have been probably a different person. But because I tried to learn by failing, I experimented, I failed, I didn't give up. That's how I learned anything that I did. That, I feel, helps other people repeat. It's easier to repeat that than coming from a place of knowledge and theory. This is more experimental. You cannot do anything wrong. There's really nothing one can do that is wrong because it's your thing. Who is anybody to tell you this is wrong? And you shouldn't certainly be telling yourself what you are doing is wrong because it's not. There is no right and wrong to this. If it is bringing you joy, then that matters. If you're still scrapbooking, if you're keeping the memory of your family, that's what's valuable. Are they going to care that your page was not as beautiful as someone else's, or you didn't use the fanciest embellishments, nobody is going to care. What matters is that you cared enough to preserve their stories. And I think because I believe that so much that people also believe it when I tell them that it's okay. Don't compare yourself with anybody else's work.
So you're just basically, when you're teaching in these classes, these are things that you've learned through experimentation, and then you're passing on that knowledge for people to just try and do what they can do with this technique. There's no specific expectation that they come out with some perfect thing. It's just a technique to learn to express themselves.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure there are other people who can teach better, who can produce better projects than I do. But that is not the point of it at all. They are doing what they can do. They're born with their assets, their liabilities, as I am too. And just that validation, it's okay. You cannot make a mistake here. And no one cares if you made a mistake. Nobody has to know. And you give up on that notion of perfection and everything is great.
So where do people find you to learn these classes? Do you have a website?
I do. I have a website, mousaha.com. And I have links to all my workshops. There's a tab, online workshops, and you can find all my current classes there. And the next year I'll be teaching Wanderlust with Kasha Avery from Everything Art. And then there's Life Book with Tamara Laporte. And I had my last class with Creative Bug came out in November, just last month. You can find out more directly from my website. And I also wanted to give your listeners a gift. So I sent you an email this morning. I hope it made it to you. It's just like a little print of one of the things that I made. Like there was this one day I was very frustrated. Whatever I was envisioning was not, I couldn't translate it into paper. So I just stopped and I decided, you know what, let me make something that is not connected to anything that is pressuring me right now or is stressful. So I did this one piece, just a few colors here and there, and then the thing was trust your imagination. I needed to hear that so much at that moment. So I made that, and that is available as an art print. And if they follow the link, they can sign up for my newsletter, and they will also get the link to download that art. And if it makes a difference to even one person, just a reminder to trust your imagination, then that would be wonderful.
Oh, well, I'll do that. That sounds wonderful. And we'll make sure that's in the show notes so that the listener can go there and sign up for your newsletter and get that print to download. That sounds wonderful. And so basically we'll find the links to where you are because, Creative Bug and to these other workshops and everything. So that'll all be on your website, and we'll make sure all that shows up in the show notes so that people can find that. Now, I think you've given a very good story about how you got to where you are and what you're doing. And your work is very exciting, and it is imaginative and colorful and interesting. And, it's just hard to communicate the visual with the verbal here. So I'm hoping everyone goes to visit your site and see what work you do. And I was wondering, we usually end the show with just, you've given some general thoughts about creativity, about how people should not be comparing themselves and just basically enjoying things. But I was wondering, in your own words, if you could tell us just to kind of sum up your general thoughts on creativity.
Well, it all, I believe, depends on your approach to making art. It's just sometimes letting go, and it could be nobody else is judging us. We are the worst critics we have. Inner critic is always the strongest and stronger than any other voice. So you sometimes have to just tell that voice to go basically take a hike while you make something. It's just do it. Nothing explains this better. Just do it is the perfect thing. If you do it, you'll like it. The more you do it, the better you get. And it doesn't matter. Somebody is probably, I believe in destiny. So somebody who is better than you is maybe destined to be where they are, and you are where you are. Do it for yourself, for your own well-being. Because I make art, I live more mindfully. It helps me. It's almost my meditation. I I am getting more comfortable with uncomfortable feelings because I make art. It just helps me see things from a different perspective. Like I said, yes, there is a place for great art that's going to live in museums. But even if it's not that, if it's bringing you joy, then it's doing its work. Not everything has the same purpose. It doesn't have to be someone else's purpose, someone else's goal. It's just what you need. And creating that pressure, life is so fast-paced now. There are so many expectations everywhere, and that is part of the human experience. It's just how it is. I have 3 kids. I have so little time to do things, but I still make the time, and I feel accomplished if I have been able to devote the time I wanted to devote to something that day. I go to bed happy that I did something for myself that made me happy.
That's wonderful. I love that thought. I love your art, and I've really enjoyed speaking with you and hearing your story. It's just wonderful. Thank you for the chance.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. I hope you're having a wonderful start to 2019. I hate the short days, but love how each day since the winter solstice, the world looks brighter. I'm holding out hope for the world at large, too. Meantime, lots of battery-powered candlelight and full-spectrum lights in use around my house. It's a good metaphor for the world at large. Light your corner with loving spirit, and everything will seem brighter. As a physician who's been ill, just a reminder here for those at risk to speak to their healthcare provider about the vaccine for shingles. I am so delighted that Mou joined us today to talk about her art and scrapbook stories. Today's show notes are on the Creative Approach podcast webpage with links to Mou and her activities. While at the webpage, www.acreativeapproachpodcast.com, do sign up for the email list. You'll find you can send audio feedback on the podcast website too. When online, please visit and join our Creative Approach Podcast Facebook page. Your questions and feedback on the show are welcome on our Facebook group page, so do join that place as well. Just a reminder to become a subscriber to a Creative Approach podcast on your favorite podcast platform if you've not done so already. The podcast is available on most, including Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and Pandora. If you'd like to support the show with even $1 a month, your generosity would be most welcome. You can do that by going to the Patreon tab on the website. Please join me at a Creative Approach podcast in future conversations where I hope you will find inspiration to make things, tell your story, and explore a creative approach to life.